esteemed compatriots of Burkina Faso, African leaders, and international friends. Today, we gather not just to mark a day, but to proclaim a great truth. The era of bowing to colonial legacies is over. I, Ibrahim Traoré, as the leader of this nation, declare that we will no longer wear the French judicial robes, symbols of oppression and dependency, and instead we will don the Faso Dan Fani, our ancestral traditional attire, to assert our African identity. Let us reflect on our history. For over a century, rulers from the West imposed upon us not only laws, but also how we see ourselves. They brought black robes, foreign legal systems, and an economy that enslaved us on our own resource-rich land. But today, I say to you, enough. We are no longer puppets, dancing to the strings of invaders. We are the sons and daughters of Africa, farmers like Musa, who turn tomatoes from a burden into an asset, and the youth dreaming of a free future. Our journey began on barren fields, where farmers like Musa once faced starvation. But with unity and perseverance, we built a tomato processing plant, created 300 jobs, and took our products to international markets from 500 CFA francs. The value of each crate now stands at 2,500 CFA francs, a testament to the power of African labor when we control our destiny. This is not my achievement alone, but ours. Those who dared to stand up and change. Ditching the French robes is not just symbolic. It is a revolution of the mind. We have expelled French troops, rejected EMF loans, and established a state-owned mining company to reclaim our resources. Burkina Faso is now building a gold refinery, establishing national reserves, and investing in education, all with our own strength. We need no pity from the West. We need freedom to decide for ourselves. I draw inspiration from Thomas Sankara, who said, "A slave who cannot rise up to fight does not deserve pity." Those words echo in my heart and in yours. We must fight not only to defend our territory from terrorism, but also to protect our culture and honor. From today, our judges will wear Faso Dan Fani, not for aesthetics, but to remind us that justice must come from our own people, not the legacy of invaders. African leaders, hear me. We cannot continue to be puppets for foreign powers. Abandon military pacts with France, invest in our agriculture and industry, and build a strong African alliance. Burkina Faso has begun this path, and we invite you to join us from Mali to Niger, from Ghana to South Africa. Let us together create a self-reliant, prosperous Africa. Youth, you are the future. Keep learning, keep fighting, and take pride in your identity. Let no one tell you Africa cannot stand on its own feet. We did it with tomatoes. We'll do it with gold, with education, and with peace. To conclude, I echo Sankara's words, homeland or death, we shall triumph. Let us move forward together with Faso Dan Fani on our shoulders and faith in our hearts. Thank you.
If you've ever stood inside a courtroom, even just in a movie, you probably imagine a judge in a long black robe, solemn-faced, seated high above, with every eye in the room fixed on them like they are the living symbol of justice. It's an image that feels universal, not just in the West, but across much of Africa. But have you ever wondered, in countries once colonized, Why do people still wear the symbols of their former oppressors in the name of justice? One early morning in 2025, in the capital city of Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso's president, Ibrahim Traoré, stepped up to the podium with a steady gaze and wearing something no one expected. Not a military uniform, not a Western suit, and certainly not a French-style judicial robe. Instead, he wore Faso Dan Fani, a hand-woven cloth rooted in the identity of the Mossi people. Facing the national television cameras, he said, "Our justice cannot be dressed in the symbols of those who once silenced us." That single sentence, simple but powerful, sparked a wave across this West African nation. From old textile workshops, to the hands of rural women who once wove cloth just for village markets, to university classrooms where young law students began asking difficult questions. What is justice if it doesn't speak our language? If it doesn't wear our face? From that moment forward, Burkina Faso began rewriting its story of justice, not with borrowed legal ink, but with threads of memory, resistance, and cultural pride. Today, let's rediscover that journey. The journey of how one speech didn't just change an outfit. It quietly began to reweave an entire nation's belief in what justice can look like. Let's go back in time. Not to Burkina Faso, but to Paris. Picture a grand marble courtroom, polished wood, and judges draped in flowing black robes trimmed with red velvet and gold braid. Those robes, heavy and ornate, were never just fashion. They were designed to radiate authority, to tell everyone in the room, "We decide what's right. We speak the law." Now fast forward to the 1960s. As African countries gained independence, something strange happened. The French left, but the robes stayed. Across Francophone Africa, from Senegal to Côte d'Ivoire, the symbol of colonial justice remained stitched into the daily rituals of courtrooms. Judges continued to dress like those who once judged them. Why? Some said it was about tradition. Others claimed it lent professionalism. But ask an ordinary citizen in a rural village and they might tell you, it just looks foreign. In Burkina Faso, that robe stood for something deeper. For decades, it wasn't just the garment. It was the posture, the language, the silence. Justice felt distant. Judges sat high above, wearing symbols no one recognized, speaking laws many couldn't understand. And so, trust in the system slowly faded. That's why Traoré's speech hit differently. When he stood there and declared that justice must no longer wear the robes of oppressors, it wasn't just about clothes. It was a signal that justice should feel familiar, that it could finally come down from the marble tower and walk among the people again. Here's a small but powerful story. A retired judge once shared how he felt during his early years. Wearing the French robe, he said, gave him pride, but also made him feel like he was playing a role in a theater that wasn't written for him. It was like acting in someone else's play, he confessed. When Traoré made the switch official, the same judge was seen wearing Faso Dan Fani at a local mediation. He smiled more. He spoke in his native language, and the villagers, for the first time, didn't call him Your Honor. They called him Uncle. So what's the lesson here? Symbols matter. They shape how people feel seen or invisible. They tell us who belongs and who doesn't. And if you want people to believe in justice again, maybe you start by making it look like something they recognize in their own mirror. But the robe was just the beginning. Because this wasn't only about changing appearances. It was about reviving something much older than French courts or colonial law books, something woven deep into the identity of a people. So now let's shift from the courtroom to the cloth. Because the fabric Traoré wore that day wasn't chosen at random. It carries a story of struggle, strength, and spirit. Let's take a closer look at what Faso Dan Fani really means. To the people who weave it, wear it, and now walk it into the halls of power. You might be thinking, it's just a piece of fabric. How much could it really matter? But in Burkina Faso, Faso Dan Fani is more than cloth. It's memory, it's defiance, it's identity, woven strand by hands that once resisted colonial power. The name Faso Dan Fani means the woven cloth of national pride. It's spun from locally grown cotton, dyed and hand-loomed by women in rural villages. Each piece tells a story. Traditional motifs, earthy tones, no thread the same, but all unmistakably Burkinabe. More than 40 years ago, President Thomas Sankara wore this very fabric at the United Nations. Standing tall, he said, "If we don't wear what we make, we are wearing our submission." He made it mandatory for civil servants to wear Faso Dan Fani, not just to boost local industry, but to reclaim a cultural soul smothered by imported suits. That spirit faded after his assassination, but under Ibrahim Traoré, it's found breath again. When he ordered the judiciary to abandon French robes and adopt Faso Dan Fani, it wasn't just symbolism. It was a lifeline for forgotten villages, and for women whose looms had long fallen silent. In Zabré, a weaving village where 100 looms once sat unused, the sound of wooden clacks echoed once more. The government rolled out contracts, thousands of meters for judges, diplomats, even school uniforms. One woman, Ayala, age 63, shared, "I used to weave for weddings. Now I weave for justice. Still cloth, but now it feeds my family." Within just 6 months, more than 40 weaving cooperatives revived. Thousands of rural women and youth found stable incomes. Some young people even launched their own brands, like Justice in Threads, selling Faso Dan Fani overseas to buyers in France, Canada, and the US. So what began as a political gesture became an economic ripple. A speech turned into an outfit turned into a paycheck, and a paycheck turned into dinner on the table. How can one piece of cloth do all that? Maybe because it carries something a French robe or Western suit never could. Connection. Faso Dan Fani is woven from stories, from calloused hands, from the hum of village songs, from the tears of women who survived wars and built homes from nothing. When someone wears it, not just anyone, but a judge, a lawmaker, a president, it no longer feels like politics. It feels like coming home. Cloth doesn't speak, but when worn by the right people, it tells stories. And that story is reminding people that justice doesn't have to come dressed in Parisian gold. Sometimes it comes from the hands of your mother, but that's just the surface. Because if the outside is changing, what about the inside? Is the legal system itself shifting? Is this movement reshaping how justice is practiced? Not just how it looks? That's what we'll discover in the next chapter, where law, tradition, and people meet under the same tree. In a small courtroom in Kaya province, under a tin roof and surrounded by weathered benches, a young judge sat across from two families locked in a land dispute. But what caught everyone off guard that day wasn't the verdict. It was the voice. He wasn't speaking French. He wasn't quoting legal codes. He was speaking more, the mother tongue of both families. His voice was slow, steady. He paused often to listen to elders. There was no gavel, no robe, just a man in a simple Faso Dan Fani shirt, listening. By the end, the two families shook hands. One grandmother leaned over and whispered, "Justice today," sounded like the voice inside my own heart. This wasn't the justice system most were used to. But scenes like this are becoming more common across Burkina Faso and more meaningful. You see, for decades, the nation's legal system was taught, practiced, and administered in French, a language still foreign to most rural citizens. Court documents, verdicts, legal rights, all written in a tongue many only half understood. Over time, justice became distant, cold, almost mythical. Traoré knew that changing the robes was symbolic, but changing the structure, that's where the real work began. A new initiative called Traditional Justice Meets Modern Law began forming quietly across the country. Its mission? To explore how ancestral practices like community mediation under a baobab tree could be blended into the formal legal system. In some Sahel villages, land disputes are now resolved not in courthouses, but under trees. Elders sit with both sides, tea is poured, and the judgment isn't handed down from above, it's earned through listening. One young judge shared this. "I once quoted the entire civil code during a case. The room stayed silent. Then I told a folk story about how their great-grandparents settled land disagreements. They nodded instantly." Today, law schools across Burkina Faso have begun offering courses in local languages, oral traditions, and cultural negotiation. And judges are learning that law, when spoken in the people's tongue, carries not just authority, but trust. Of course, no one is throwing out modern law, but here's the thing. If justice is written in a language the people don't understand, spoken in a room they fear, by someone dressed in something that doesn't belong to them, do they really believe in it? The answer is becoming clearer. No justice system can be effective if the people don't feel it belongs to them. Here's the deeper lesson. If you want justice to be fair, start by making it familiar. And to make it familiar, you have to speak the language of those who need it most. What Traoré is doing may not be perfect, but he's asking the right questions. Whose justice is this? And who has the right to feel seen by it? Like language, justice must be translated, not just in words, but in symbols, in memory, in the rhythm of daily life. And when ordinary people begin to understand the law, not because it was explained to them, but because it resonated with them, that's when justice becomes real. But this shift isn't just about village courtrooms. It's growing into something much bigger. Because when an entire generation begins to question how power looks, feels, and speaks, change doesn't just knock at the door. It rebuilds the house. And that's where we head next. Where cloth and culture meet capital. Where tradition breathes new life into the economy. In a dusty alleyway of Bobo Dioulasso, there's a place once known as the Loom Street. Years ago, it echoed with the rhythmic click-clack of dozens of wooden looms. But then came the flood of Chinese fabrics. Industrial weaving machines replaced human hands, and slowly, the music of the looms faded, like an old song nobody played anymore, until one morning. The local government announced a major contract from the central administration. Faso Dan Fani would become the official fabric of Burkina Faso's judiciary. Suddenly, the weavers were called back. Salimata, a 39-year-old single mother of 3, had left weaving behind years ago to sell charcoal in the market. Now she returned to her old loom, this time with a 12-month contract in hand. "Every meter of cloth I weave," she said, "brings my children one step closer to school." Across the country, cooperatives were reborn, not just to serve national demand, but to export. Diaspora communities in France, Canada, the US, they all wanted a piece of this new movement. Young entrepreneurs, like the team behind Terre d'Identité, signed e-commerce deals with international platforms. Within a year, the traditional textile sector had created more than 8,000 new jobs, most going to rural women and unemployed youth. One 70-year-old grandmother in Koudougou put it beautifully. "I've spent my life weaving, but now they say I'm weaving the future." And it wasn't just the weavers, dye makers, organic cotton farmers, truck drivers, fashion designers. An entire web of supporting industries began to pulse with life. A new kind of economy was forming, an identity economy where heritage isn't locked in museums but stitched directly into the national supply chain. Ironically, the very institution once considered the most rigid government bureaucracy became the biggest customer. As officials started wearing Faso Dan Fani to work, the cloth was no longer reserved for festivals or funerals. It became a kind of national uniform. One minister joked, "I used to wear Italian suits. Now I wear something my grandmother could have made, and I've never felt prouder." Behind that smile lies a quiet transformation, from symbol to employment, from fabric to food, from culture to capital, and it carries a powerful message. You don't need to give up your identity to grow. Sometimes your identity, if nurtured right, is the very foundation for prosperity. But of course, not everyone applauds when a nation stands on its own terms. So next, we'll explore the challenges. Because what starts as cultural pride can quickly be labeled isolationism. And sometimes, when you choose to speak your own language, the world stops listening. When Burkina Faso replaced its French-style judicial robes with Faso Dan Fani, not everyone applauded. A European newspaper wrote, "This is a populist move, regressive and potentially dangerous for the integrity of justice." One Western diplomat remarked, "Symbols of law should not be dictated by emotion." But behind the criticism, there was something else, a quiet discomfort. Because if a small nation like Burkina Faso can stand tall in its own skin, what if others follow? In an era of globalization, small nations are often given a choice: blend in to be accepted, or stand apart and risk being called backward. But why is different always seen as dangerous? Why is a French suit modern, but hand-woven African cloth emotional or primitive? During a press conference, Ibrahim Traoré answered this with clarity. "We're not rejecting the world. We're simply asking the world to see us as we truly are. And maybe that's the most radical idea of all. Burkina Faso isn't walking away from globalization. They're stepping into it, with their own colors, voice, and symbols, not as a copy of someone else, but as an honest, unfiltered version of themselves. It's not an easy path. It requires courage, patience, and deep cultural pride. But when judges wear cloth woven by village women, when trials happen in native tongues, When rural economies revive not through aid but through identity, it's no longer a reform. It's a quiet declaration of freedom. And perhaps what unsettles more powerful nations isn't Burkina Faso's cloth or its traditions. It's their belief that even a small country has the right to write its own story. Now, what do you think? Can a piece of cloth really do all that? Maybe. Because in a world where so many are taught to look, act, and speak like someone else, sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is to simply be yourself.